Previously with AJG, we discussed the nuances between characters and avatars, where games need to find a niche between having their protag be a person independent of the player, and an agreeable blank slate to project onto. To sum that video up, the goal of fantasy is to get players to empathize with hypothetical folk. So the secret is to get the player in their avatar's shoes through a shared set of circumstances. We did skip over one important character archetype there though. The player can play themselves via projection or meld into one of the developer's characters, but I left out the player's ability to be creative and make up their own dudes. How can a game encourage actual roleplay when the role is an unknown? How can it make that roleplay substantial, consequential, and fun? And how can that character show up in gameplay and story points if the dev has to guess at their protag's motivations? The term roleplay has been about as diluted as can be. It's supposed to mean a game where you act as someone other than yourself, but nowadays it functionally is just used as shorthand for either a very long and story-focused fantasy single-player game, or a short and replayable class-based competitive one. I'd guess you'd specify by saying it's an RP game and not an RPG, and even then, actually RPing isn't really something you can force the player into. It's not something you can turn into a set of functions. Games like Devil May Cry do a good job of rewarding the player for emulating the protagonist, but if you try to shoehorn the wrong guy into the wrong game, things fall apart fast. DMC just doesn't work with a pacifist PC. Really, your only options are your protags or yourself, because the persona was built first by the devs, and the game design got hard-coded to make those behaviors optimal. The closest you get to genuine creativity is the Spy from TF2, a generally lackluster class that gets instant kill melee attacks on enemy combatants that aren't paying attention to him. The idea is to sneak behind enemy lines with the invisibility watch and then disguise as specific opponents. But you can get away with pretending to be some fictional noob of your own creation, stuck just outside spawn for whatever reason in the more casual games. The trick is to figure out something stupid enough to sell incompetence without motivating your onlooker to pull a double take. Very fun, and uniquely so, since such deception is a rare occurrence in the medium, though I guess there's never really a reason not to spy check. That makes it suboptimal and almost more of an exception in a nearly incompatible medium than anything. It's all pretty unfortunate because ideally it should be just as fun to make up a dude as it is to throw together a strategy or build a base, but the genre kinda got cannibalized by different ideas. With that said, people are still all over character creators, so it's not like the demand isn't there. There's two significant struggles here though. The first is that the creator needs to be flexible enough to preemptively cover whatever the player comes up with. Not every character is going to fit the same skeleton perfectly. Sometimes people want to be fat, or short, or black. That needs to be ready for them. Maybe not in that order. A little worried about the delivery on that. The good news is that it's not that hard to implement with foresight. So long as the clothing doesn't clip or stretch in too weird a way, the player may just be able to bring their idea to fruition. At least, assuming they want all 4 limbs and nothing extra. Being able to edit after the fact is also critical, since you might notice something after long-term exposure. This also goes for actual gameplay too, which is our second struggle. You're acting out what your fictional dude would do, so you'd like to see how they'd fare in the world. There's the classic good versus evil, selfish versus selfless dilemma, but ideally the devs would make more of a game out of it than just a binary good-bad end type of deal. If you're playing a quote-unquote evil character, then maybe the game could have some mechanic with some sort of taboo implications to it. For example, Fallout lets you be a cannibal, which allows you to heal at the cost of karma and your social standing. Flesh that out even more and you get the different schools of magic from Dark Souls. Scholarly wizards find pyromancers simple, and dark or crystal spells suggest that your player character might be on the brink of madness. Not only does this accomplish some world building, but it also gives your character a place in it. It's the tiny choices that establish what kind of a person you're playing, and simulating a new worldview leads to new playstyles, and essentially a brand new game. In totality, the goal of hypotheticals is to empathize with decisions made from different viewpoints. But sometimes, the goal of imitating different viewpoints is to test them out in a bunch of hypotheticals. Big moral choices help develop characters, but not as much as the tiny ones, and character creators are best when they're flexible enough to get creative with. Role-playing games may not necessarily force the player to get into character, but they allow you to choose to walk in someone else's shoes for a bit. When your every action is informed by the emulation of another perspective, it quickly develops into a genuine empathy workout. And that's the muscle that keeps us all together, IRL.